sweets, and in America you can sell candy. But these days, yeah, cleaning products, yeah, that's yeah, that's a thing. But I completely understand. Those were really really good examples, and I think that
I mean, the other thing that springs to mind as well is, I mean, this guy happened to be disabled, but I guess you could make the connection with non-disabled people as well. But I remember one guy coming through to the door one day, and he said to me, "I want to set up a burger thing," and I said, "Okay," and he said, "But where I've got in mind is next to McDonald's and but the thing was, he was looking to sell like healthy burgers but he actually did it. You know, he did do it, and I think that was like just trying to get him motivated and say, "Well, hang on a minute, what your product is a different product to to what the McDonald's is or whatever." I'm not saying that McDonald's is bad, so please don't sue me, McDonald's. But yeah, so yeah.
Glad you think. See, I didn't see you made less work for me as a pod. I almost had to clarify that. Right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Good. But I see. That's definitely some ironic humor that he set up his quote unquote healthy burger place next to McDonald's. Of course, we aren't saying anything bad about McDonald's. I
And
am
there are
surprised.
other places, isn't it?
And nothing bad about other places as well. That's
That's it,
true.
that's it.
I appreciate the clarification. Thank you. But but that is interesting that he was allowed to do that. Probably, I mean, in the States, there's laws about where businesses are allowed to open. So, yeah, there are laws about opening businesses next to other businesses. Probably there are. So that's really interesting. But the other thing when Tom and you guys at home listener, you remember Tom Walker, Time to Talk to Tom from a couple episodes back. When he and I were speaking, he mentioned that he's on some tribunal, as he said, basically a kind of like a from an American perspective, it sounds like kind of like a jury or a committee of people who go to administrative legal hearings, and people who are disabled come and like some can you talk a little bit more about what you've done
Yeah, I mean,
in advocacy and tribunals? Yeah.
yeah, that's interesting because in a way, I come at it from a slightly different angle. We have what we call lay people. So a tribunal potential disability discrimination case against
Could
the
you
employer.
I
Um,
I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. Could you go back a couple sentences? The connection broke up for a moment. Could you go back and repeat your last two sentences, please?
right. Okay. Where did I go with that? Okay. So I was saying that the tribunal basically will consider issues around employment and inequality, whether the employer is treating the person in a less favourable way or not meeting the needs. But equally, that can apply for benefits as well. So let's say, for argument's sake, over here, I'm not quite sure how healthy the benefit system is, but we've got quite a good, potentially, it's arguable with, but potentially a good benefit system to support disabled people. But from time to time, that goes wrong, and people might not be getting the right entitlement to benefits. They might not get the needs met in employment. And so I and others will get involved to kind of support the needs of disabled people to help them through that tribunal process. And the layperson in Tom's case would sit on the tribunal to hear the case, and kind of he would have his say about what he thinks, but there would also be another person who has like legal responsibility there, and there will be also other individuals involved in that as well. Where my advocacy role would be supporting the individual to deal with that tribunal from the perspective of the disabled person and not the government, if that makes sense. Yeah.
It does make sense. So basically, I probably have two questions about it. It sounds like to me that when you're sitting on the tribunal, you're basically an advocate in kind of like a jury listening to a specific legal case.
That's
where
correct.
someone with a disability, whether it's blindness, whatever the disability
Yeah,
is having some sort of a legal situation or case with an employer or with employment. Right.
that's correct. That's
And then
correct.
also, now it also sounds like, because it's a legal case, it also sounds like there is probably some sort of a judge in the room along with some sort of a lawyer, right?
Well, that's a bit too strong a word, but you're right. It's that sort of similar situation, yeah. So they would have like legal authority, and then there would be another person as well, and then they would have like a lay person. So the person wouldn't necessarily be directed in the legal process or anything like that, but they're to observe and kind of give an impartial view about the needs of the disabled person.
Okay, so that would be a law clerk. So that's what we would call that, a clerk of the court or a law clerk, someone who probably went to law school themselves and probably is admitted to the bar, but is in that role to kind of analyze and in some rare cases maybe even interpret the code and the situation. That's what it sounds like to me.
Well, I think it's even a bit looser than that. To be fair, I mean, what the person say in Tom's case wouldn't necessarily have a legal background, but what they're focusing on is like he as a disabled person would have a lived experience of living as a disabled person, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Huh, huh. Um, I suppose it makes sense a little bit. Yeah, I suppose. I mean, I guess in the States, perhaps we're more formal, where we have like in a courtroom. I mean, it obviously every case is different. It depends on the case, but in a courtroom, you have a judge, and then you almost always have a lawyer, and then sometimes you have a paralegal, which helps a lawyer, and then you have the people. You have the person with the disability.
Yeah.
Um, but these, so in the States, I guess, listener, for you at home, you have explained it perfectly, John, but American listeners may be a little shaky about this understanding. Basically, the closest thing to this would be an administrative law case where someone with a disability has, as we say in the States, some sort of a situation with employment or an employer, and they need the case to be reviewed so that they can obviously live the life they want and have employment. It would be, if it came to this in the States, it would be reviewed by a judge, by what we call an administrative law judge, is what it's called. But that's extremely interesting. So then, if there is no, technically by definition of British law, if there's no physical judge in the room, then um, perhaps I'm not getting it all the way. But how are these things like resolved then if there's
Well,
not a
I think
judge?
what happens in the end is it can go higher, and so if the decision isn't taken at that level, it can go to like what they call judicial process.
Okay, got
You
you.
know, and
So
then it goes higher again. If you see my
okay, so this tribunal, as you're calling it, is basically a meeting where people meet, a group of people come together and meet to talk about the issue, and the person who's, I guess, kind of the chair of the meeting, if they feel that the issue warrants being heard by a judge, then the case is basically appealed or promoted up to a judge who will then hear the case.
I mean, what can happen there? Let's say, for argument's sake,
Right.
just so that I don't mention any individuals, imagine that
Sure,
I
sure.
had to with my employer. I could then, request that it goes to tribunal or something like that. The tribunal can then deal with it. Now, hopefully, what you're hoping there is either mediation or the tribunal will resolve it at that point. But then, if you're not happy, it can then go to like judicial process, and that's the final stage. Then, yeah.
Right. Okay. So then the judicial process, that would mean a judge. That would mean that it would be a courtroom with a
It would
judge.
have more legal teeth. Yeah.
More le- more legal. That's cool. More legal teeth. We don't say that. That's good. More legal teeth. That's a great British. More legal teeth. Ooh, I love that. More legal teeth. That's cool. Yeah. As in, how do we put that even in American English?
Oh,
More, more. What do we say? More. Oh boy. There is a terminology for it. More legal standing.
that's it. Or
Legal
legal
standing.
status might be the way. Legal
Legal
status.
sta So okay, so I mean, this is really cool. I mean, we don't really have this in the States, because it's just the way our laws are set up in America. But it's very hard to have a case heard by a judge, and we don't really have this tribunal, as you call it. Um, usually if cases are severe enough, they would just go to a judge, and then it becomes a court case. But the reality, and the sad reality, and the sad truth of it is that everything is expensive in the United States. Lawyers are no exception. So the person with the disability would have to have support from an advocacy organization to hire the lawyer, to review the case, to retain a lawyer, and then the lawyer files a motion in the court, I guess, is how we
Yeah.
would
I
how we
mean,
would call
the
it.
beauty about our system in a way is, and certainly at the moment is, if you take a case to tribunal, the person who's taking, so in my case, if it was me, I would don't have to pay anything to take it to tribunal. Yeah,
Oh, really?
yeah. You don't in the UK you don't pay to take it to tribunal at the moment. Obviously, as you go higher up the chain, you start involving lawyers and the legal system. And that's a slightly different ballgame. But what can sometimes happen in the UK is if the employee is involved in a union, yeah, the union, let's say for argument's sake, that they take a grievance procedure out against the employer, they can then take it to the union. The union will help them fight that case and basically pay their legal fees.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So so in a way, although unions are not as strong as they would have been in the past in the UK, if you're in the union, particularly some of the big unions, they have their own legal advice team, and because you pay sort of like a monthly subscription to that, you're then entitled to legal support free of charge because you
Hmm.
paid in the union fees, if you like. Yeah.
Yeah, you buy union membership, and then they provide legal
That's it.
counsel.
That's one of the
Yeah.
services they will provide.
Well, and there probably is something. I mean, I wouldn't know, but there probably is something similar to the States. But the overwhelming problem that we're seeing more and more, and every year that I get, every year that I work for myself and start to understand more of society, I start to understand this more, that many, many, many people with disabilities in the United States are severely underemployed or unemployed,
Mm.
meaning they oftentimes don't simply lack the funding to appropriately advocate for themselves, which is why I think, among many things, I think podcasting is a great source of advocacy, education, and inspiration for people in the world. I really believe that.
Can I, can
So
I,
sure.
can I ask a question?
Of course you can. Of course you can.
In the UK, we have something called the Equality Act, which was
Yeah.
to support the disabled person
Mm-hmm.
in all aspects of their life. Now, my understanding is that America's got something similar. So is that the case? And if it is the case, are people able to use that, if you like, to challenge discrimination or the
It's a
system?
really excellent. So yes, it is the case. To go back as a reference, as Tom and I were talking about, there for you have the DDA, the Disability Discrimination Act, DDA in the UK. The equivalent is in America we have ADA, Americans with Disabilities Act. The answer is this: that act directly affected the physical access and physical barriers that existed to buildings and restaurants and public places, oftentimes for people in wheelchairs or people with, physical handicaps. And that's great and wonderful. But the fundamental problem, the meat and potatoes, when you really dig into the meal here, the real problem is that there is no law, in my opinion, by the way, there is no law in the United States that can prevent people from having preconceived notions and opinions about people. So because of that, discrimination is still, in my opinion, a huge problem in the States. And many people with disabilities become discriminated so severely that they simply just give up. So it's a serious issue. Could you? So the answer is